You have been sucked in to the Create Unknown, in which you'll hear us detail our deficiencies, our inadequacies, and our general suckitude. We talk a lot about solutions for creatives and entrepreneurs, and now it's time to talk about our problems. There are a lot of them, and some of them are big, because we suck. And if you'd like to support this suck, head on over to patreon.com/thecreateunknown and suck along with us. 100% of contributions go right back into the show and TCU community. So we suck just a little bit less each week. The link's in the description. Kevin sucks more than I do.
Yeah, unless
Noisy
you were getting
ducks.
close with somebody, then they would also get rained upon.
Getting close, Kevlieb.
Getting close. Yeah, like hugging your mom.
Hugging your mom, is that what getting close is?
Yes, yeah. Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown. I am Kevin Lieber. With me, as always, is Matthew Tabor. Matt, tell me something.
So I had something that I was going to tell you and decided at the last minute that it was just too hot for TCU.
Ooh.
I had to pull it. Yeah, couldn't happen. So I replaced it because you and I were talking about metal shows. You used to go to a lot of metal shows. Is that right?
Yeah, there was a period of my life in my younger days where I was living in Portland, Oregon with a buddy of mine. We were both really into heavy metal, and there was literally a place within walking distance, within a 4-minute walk down the block, we could go see metal bands for like $10, probably twice a week. So yeah, ended up going to a lot of shows and finding some of my favorite bands. You know, just by going to a show, not even knowing who any of these bands were, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, they were awesome. So, yeah, as a result, I can't hear too well anymore.
And what do you do at a metal show? Because the last live show I went to was on Kenny Rogers' farewell tour, and everybody in the crowd sat there with their hands on their lap, very politely listening to Kenny do his thing, and then they got up and left in an orderly fashion when the show was over.
Yeah.
Is that how a metal show works?
Yeah, it's exactly how it works. Well, you know, it actually really depends on the venue, okay? So I don't know how in the weeds on this you want to get, but there are kind of like 3-ish places you can go see, well, maybe 4 places you can go see a metal show. One is an outdoor kind of pavilion kind of thing where they'll have like festivals. Okay. In my experience, those are not great places to go because like listening to music outdoors is usually pretty bad. The sound just goes all over the place and it just sounds like garbage, you know, playing a show outside. I don't like outdoor shows. Then you have like arenas. So your headline giant acts like Tool will play in a sports arena. And again, those places are huge. The band is usually far away unless you're paying $1 billion for seats. And there's no like pit or anything like that. Then you have these smaller venues. The place in Portland we would go to all the time is called Hawthorne Theater. There's another place called Roseland Ballroom. And those usually have a balcony. So you have 3 options in those. Those are the best places to see shows, okay? Or in like these sort of venues that always have metal bands playing them. They're small, they're pretty smelly, they're dark. And here are your 3 options. 1, there's often a balcony, so you can usually go up to the balcony and just watch the show a la Kenny Rogers. 2, you can get there super early and get to the front. That always has a barrier, like a gate. And you're safe against the gate. You'll get smushed by people behind you, but you're right there as close to the band as possible. And then 3 is just being in kind of like the general admission pit where people are just pretty much beating each other up. And usually not in like a super dangerous way, but sometimes I've seen a lot of blood and broken noses and stuff like that from time to time.
You have fallen into my trap, Kevin Lieber of Vsauce 2, because that's exactly the thing that I'm going to tell you is us talking about the metal shows, which you didn't go into any of the stuff about venues or what happens at a show. We were exclusively talking about hearing and sound. So this is, we didn't prep this, but that's exactly what I want to say is it reminded me of a thing in Bolivia called tinku. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Tinku, this is timely because it's in the first few weeks of May, I think. Tinku is a festival that starts out as dancing to music, and then it turns into a gigantic free-for-all brawl.
What?
This is a centuries-old festival, like goes back to conquistador days, and it gets dangerous. I mean, it's a beating the hell out of each other thing in the end. The same thing happens in a province in Peru, where that's more of like an airing of grievances, where it's this weird mix of what you described at a metal show mixed with a mindset of like a purge movie. It's like, this is your, imagine if Festivus was a physical fight and you just, instead of airing your grievances, you just like thumped somebody until you were okay with whatever the issue was. But Tinku sounds kind of nuts. People have died at Tinku because the fighting's gotten out of hand. There's some really good articles online. The LA Times did one like 20 years ago almost. So if you Google Tinku, you're going to have a good rabbit hole to go down.
That's amazing. And I've always wondered about, I mean, the culture around like heavy metal shows, I think from an outside perspective, does seem very kind of barbaric, I guess you would say, and kind of violent and aggressive in a bad way. But I always found it the opposite. Like, sure, you're going to have some bad actors there every now and then, but for the most part, people are going there to let off steam in a way that I think is actually really healthy. And maybe this Tinko thing that's the point of it, is to really just get out aggression in a way that hopefully, along the way, some things are going to go extra bad, but for the most part, maybe it is a necessary thing.
I got to tell you this part before we move on. I'm going to read you this tiny little passage because I just popped up, a link that I could send to people or something like that. During the brawl itself, men will often carry rocks in their hands to have greater force in their punches, or they'll just throw them at opponents. Sometimes in the town of Macha and Potosi, where the brawl gets the most violent, men will wrap strips of cloth with shards of glass stuck to them around their fists to cause greater damage. Slingshots and whips are also used, though not as much as hand-to-hand combat. The last day of the fight, this is multiple days, Kevin, is considered the most violent, and police almost always have to separate the mass of bloody men and women.
Wow.
How's this for a metal show?
That's not normal. That's not normal at all. That's like disfigurement and death. That's a little crazy What I'm trying to suggest
is that the Create Unknown community holds a Tinku festival every year, and we sort out our grievances. We have some survivors, some not survivors. We air it out. We see what happens. And I think we start with everybody in the Discord, everybody in the Patreon. We'll lose a few patrons because of this. They can't be patrons when they've been bloodied to death. But I think it's a price that this podcast needs to pay.
Yeah, a little bit Battle Royale, a little bit Hunger Games.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the patrons, because before we get into the theme of this episode, which is how you and I actually completely suck, and we're horrible.
How we suck.
Full of deficiencies in so many areas of life, personally and professionally.
Many.
I do just want to take this time to thank again all of our patrons for literally allowing the show to continue. We so greatly appreciate every single one of you and all of our listeners as well, but especially the patrons, because, without them, you freeloaders would have nothing to listen to. Let's face it.
Yes. And poor Marcus and Ben would be Yeah. I mean, there are words I don't want to use to describe what being forced to produce labor like that under the threat of tinku really is. So no, it's nice that we can do the things for the community that we want to do, and that is absolutely thanks to the patrons for that.
So with that said, let's talk about us being garbage, because I think
us being garbage. I thought it was supposed to be you being garbage.
Oh, just me? Okay, so this is an intervention.
Yeah. Surprise, Kevin. You've been lured into two horrible pits today.
Yeah, you're good. All of a sudden, you're going to bust out like a 3-page letter that you wrote.
It's going to be like
I failed you.
Like an old cartoon where they pull up the scroll and it like falls down for 50 feet. Yes. That's my list of how Kevin sucks.
Just unravels. The proclamation. Yeah. Everybody in the baby gang got together, the infantry, the entire Discord, to put together this intervention for me.
Well, you mentioned how we suck, though, but it's a very serious topic because we talk a lot about what we know, what we've learned over, I don't know, like 40 combined years of this stuff, and all the people we know and solutions to a lot of problems. We generally have a pretty good idea of how to do things and how to fix things, and that's cool. But we never really talk about the problems we have and the things that we suck at and need help with. And I think it's really important that we pretty much openly talk about flaws, deficiencies, all those negative words, because that's just reality. Like, everybody sucks at a lot of things.
Yeah, and it's really hard I think it's hard for people to admit the things that they're bad at, but gosh, like, how can you possibly get help on the things that you're bad at, or figure out how to work with other people who complement your deficiencies and complement the areas in which you lack the skills or just the temperament? I mean, this can go in so many different directions. You know, I think we each have 3 personally.
I stopped at 3. I could have gone to like 53.
Yeah, we could have probably had a lot more than 3, because I'm looking at my list of 3 and thinking, well, I didn't even mention that. So perhaps.
And we made our own lists, by the way. So like, Kevin made the list of the things that Kevin thinks Kevin is bad at. I made the list of things that I think I'm bad at. So it's not like we ripped each other on this. But I will say, before we go into it, you mentioned that it's hard to admit certain things. It's hard to see as well.
Yeah.
And one thing that's been nice with us is that there's always, when you work with somebody, or 3 people or 10 people, that's an opportunity to find out the things that you're not good at. And when you only work alone, it's really easy to never, ever realize that you're not that good at something, or maybe you're really bad at it and make a problem. So we've talked over and over. I mean, we've talked a lot about doing things that complement the other person. And at a certain point, you get into a groove where you identify those problems internally, you get a little self-awareness, and just everything works more smoothly. But we should detail these. How do you want to do it? 1-on-1, or do we want to have a Kevin sucks session and then another Kevin sucks session? And then we run out of time and can't have the Matt sucks session?
I know, it'll be a whole other episode. Yeah. We'll do 1-on-1. I'll do 1 and you do 1.
Okay.
But I do want to say that you bring up a really good point about needing to kind of calibrate your own strengths and weaknesses against those of others. And you have to be in an environment that allows you to do so. And if you're just at home or in your apartment by yourself, working on your own stuff all the time, how can you possibly do that? I mean, I know that we've talked in the past about college, right? About how expensive it is, how it's probably not a great idea to put yourself in $200,000 worth of debt for no reason.
200's a lot, yes.
That's a house. But at the same time, like, if you are able to go to a junior college or a community college, or take some sort of classes that put you in a situation with strangers, that was, to me, one of the greatest things that I was able to take from going to college was when I went to my first college at Drexel University, I understood really quickly how bad I was at computer science and engineering and just kind of like that side of the sciences, because I'm in a hallway where every single person is like a genius engineer or a genius computer scientist or budding, buddings of those two professions. And I was like, whoa, like they are way, way above me to the point where I need to leave. Like I literally don't even belong here. And I left.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're right though. You have to put yourself out in any kind of situation to find out what the strengths and the weaknesses are, both of them. You don't know how good you are. I mean, the converse to everything we're talking about is that you can be amazing at something and never know it because you work alone. There's no way for it to rise to the top or show itself in any way when you're working alone. So it's not just a negative thing, but anybody who has ever lived with somebody for the first time, dude, that's when you find out how annoying you are. When there's somebody else for the first time in your life who isn't your parents or your brother or your sister or something, or your roommate who's like mandated by school to put up with you. That's when you find out what some strengths and weaknesses are, when there's somebody, telling you that you're that this thing is really annoying or that thing is like socially unacceptable. It's kind of the same when you work with people on creative stuff too. But either way, you've got to get out and do something to even find out about any of this stuff. So what's number one? What's the first on your list? What's the first thing I can fist pump over Kevin sucking at?
The first thing I wrote down was just technical side. And technical side is a big umbrella topic that includes anything from production to post-production stuff. So when it comes to like setting up lights or dealing with cameras or editing in Photoshop or Premiere, I am bare bones competent at that stuff. If anything is mildly wrong in that process, like if I have a tiny camera thing I don't understand, I call Jake. Because Jake knows so much stuff about cameras, and I know so little about cameras, even after all these years. It's just not something that I'm competent in. Same thing with Photoshop. Like, I can just barely drag myself along the Photoshop floor to make an image that looks okay. But anything with like the remote hint of advanced technique, or even I think like moderate technique, is above my pay grade. You know what I mean? So a lot of this stuff I kind of skirt by on when it comes to the technical side of almost anything. Like, I can't think of one thing that I'm like excellent at when it comes to technical stuff.
And does that seem to bring about frustration? Like, what are the implications of that? Number one, you said straight away that you've got to rely on somebody else who is at that level to help you get through a thing, like calling Jake on a camera issue. What are the other implications of having that middle ground technical knowledge where you know enough to know how to do pretty much everything? I mean, you really do. There hasn't been a thing that's come up with Vsauce stuff or the podcast where you just like throw your hands up and say, I have no idea. You always have at least that middle ground of knowledge. But what's it feel like not to go beyond that?
It is frustrating. It does cause me to rely on other people, or always, having to ask for help, and then I have to hope that they respond and do so in a timely manner. And if they don't, then I have to wait, or all of a sudden I have to like Google things. And for whatever reason, I don't know, I've just never gotten, I feel like a perpetual freshman 101 at so much of this stuff. It's like I finished my intro to cameras class. I finished my intro to Photoshop class. I know how to get around it enough to do a couple of things, but beyond that, like, I'm in over my head. And I see so many people online now who have come up with this stuff, who are like born into this world of editing videos and uploading to YouTube. And it's just ingrained in them from such a young age. I got into this so late that, and I'm not using that as an excuse. It's not like you can't teach an old dog new tricks sort of thing. I don't know if I would have been any better having earlier experience, but suffice it to say, there are a lot of people who are way, 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 way newer to all of this stuff who are actually way better than me at a lot of this stuff. Flat out.
I can see how it would be really frustrating to troubleshoot, for example, and not know how to fix a problem when it comes up. You can't plan for that, right? Something happens and you've got to deal with it. That stinks. But do you think that this has made you plan better for the things that you can plan out because you know that you're going to need some guidance on different things? Like, can you get ahead of that limited knowledge is what I'm saying.
Well, I think with any creative endeavor, part of the fun, I think, is overcoming challenges and obstacles and clearing hurdles and that sort of thing. So one really clear example of how this manifests is how I do things physically in Vsauce 2 videos. I don't know how to animate. I don't know how to do cool VFX. I couldn't possibly. And to pay somebody to do that stuff for me is incredibly, incredibly expensive. So I don't have the money to like hire a full-time animator, and I don't have the technical ability to do it myself. So I use props. I just will physically use props and physically do things in my videos because I can. It's easy to just find action figures and like draw things on my whiteboard table rather than learning After Effects, which I don't know how to use.
It's definitely driven the creativity on a lot of your videos, is figuring out what can you do that's unique within the confines of budget, of space, of skill, all of that stuff. So it comes to a unique end, and that's cool. I wonder how, it's crazy to think about how things would be different, how videos would be different if you could just snap your fingers and sit down and pound out an animation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but the fact that people like Captain Disillusion, for instance, can do that sort of stuff is like wizardry to me. It amazes me. And that's why I love watching videos like that, because I don't know how to do that stuff. And it's very magical to me, because it just seems honestly like wizardry. So that was the first thing I thought of on my list of what I am not good at. And that's kind of the technical side of all of this stuff.
Well, thank you for your confessional.
You're welcome.
That's a good start. Mine is more conceptual, my first one. And it's that I have a tendency to think too big on virtually everything. So my instant thought when a thing comes up is, what can this be down the line? How big can it get? What do you have to do to get there? I'll give you a specific example of how this plays out. My brother is a financial advisor, and he wanted to send kind of a weekly little video message to his clients about a specific topic, related to investment or just whatever it is, a 5-minute little thing that's once a week. So it's a really little thing. Instantly, I'm talking to him about, what's your budget? Because for this amount, you could set up this very streamlined system so that everybody at your firm in each of their practice areas could be doing one of these once a week. And then all of a sudden, your company has a constant everyday thing where they're putting out content that's valuable to their clients, Monday through Friday, one each. And I'm blowing it up. He wants to sit down and do like a fireside chat for 5 minutes, hit the stop button, upload it, and have it be useful. And I'm immediately thinking like this content factory across investments, tax strategies, like 7 different verticals, turning it into Huffington Post, this, small financial firm. that's good and it's bad. It's a lot like what you just said, where you have limitations. That's bad in the sense that you can't sit down and pound out an animation. It's good in the sense that it makes you work with people who are better than you. You know, you can get a camera strategy from Jake, and it's probably going to be better than your DIY solution. That stuff is both a weakness and a strength, and so is thinking really big. You know, and over time, I've come to realize, though, that it can be very overwhelming when somebody has an idea or wants something done to get smacked with like the master plan for how to execute this on like fantastic fashion. It's a really weird thing because you need to do it so that you have a sense of what the next steps are if you want to scale anything, but you also need to avoid it so that you start in the first place. You can get into so much planning and analysis that you never begin the thing. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know how many ideas I've had that I never executed beyond that level because I got wrapped up in the big plan of it. It's been a tremendous burden to think on a grand scale. Only now, which is really about 20 years into the general career on all of this stuff, am I beginning to sort out the parts that are strengths and the parts that I need to avoid. Only now is it becoming clear how to think in a healthy way on a really large scale. A big part of that has been YouTube. You know, I did some seminars and things like that for smaller creators. I talked to a bunch who are small and getting not small, which is cool to see. But talking with them has really shown what that balance needs to be. So I'm getting better. This number one weakness of fantastical thinking, I'm getting a hold of it. It's becoming harnessed and workable. But God, I just think of how many things I ruined and I murdered. It's like that, what was it? The Abominable Snowman cartoon where he squeezes the little Bugs Bunny, calls him George, you know, the thing where like,
well, that's
Lenny
just,
and of Mice and Men petting the rabbit
mice
to
and
death.
Men. Yeah, it's like Looney Tunes of Mice and Men. Yeah.
Yeah. How many times have I murdered a tiny, good, sweet, cute little thing in that fashion? It's horrible to think about how many things I've killed because I Lenny petted them until their neck broke.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's funny how grotesque that analogy is, but also how fitting it is.
Fits.
It is. It's like, I love this so much. I'm going to pet you and hold you and squeeze you forever. And then it just smushes in your hand and you have nothing left. Because I was trying to think of some sort of historical analogy, you know, like Rome or something never conquering a single province because they got too wrapped up in conquering all of Europe or whatever. I don't know, something a little more along the historical lines of like nation building.
Yeah. There are a bunch of those with really expansive empires where Genghis Khan is an example of that, just ravaging this massive, massive territory and not having the people or the kind of infrastructure to maintain it as an empire and to rule over that thing that you've obliterated. It's kind of the same thing. There are definitely historical examples like that, but you've got to find that balance of like, what's the max that I can do and still the max that I can actually administer, or what can I do on a project? So yeah, it's been a tremendous asset at certain points. It's been a tremendous failure and burden at others.
So before we move on, because I'm interested to know how you think about it now. How do you decide, like, I am going to consciously avoid worrying about turning this thing into an empire, and I'm just going to be okay with doing the little thing now and seeing how it plays out?
It's being very realistic about the people I'm talking to, what their comfort level is, what their skills are, what the resources are, being really honest about what that is, and the same for myself. So thinking about we talked a couple episodes ago. I'm into nuts lately. I like nuts. I'm thinking a lot about nut
Clip that
farming,
out.
nut processing, nut harvesting. Yeah. So I think a lot about nuts, but the
Yeah. Sorry. So childish.
So the reality, though, is that whatever I do there is going to have to be something that fits in to the amount of time I have and the amount of money I have to do it. That's it. I've got to snap back to reality on those things. And I can't think about a 10-acre nut farm when that's not my full-time job, So it's just being super honest about what I can do in a way that reins in whatever that big idea is. So it's a slow process. I'm getting better, but it sucks. I wish I had no motivation and no ambition ever sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say that's exactly what it is. Just too ambitious for your own good. All right, I'm going to move on to my number 2, and this is something that we've talked about a whole bunch, did a whole episode on, and that is networking. I am pretty bad at networking. I am pretty bad at socializing.
This isn't true. That's an overstatement. You're not bad at it. People really enjoy you in all fashions, which I've seen many times with my own eyes. So it's not that. It's not that you're bad at it. You may not like it.
I think I am bad at it, though. I mean, I guess when I am in a situation, I guess we'll parse out kind of like 2 important elements of this. Okay.
Yep.
So one is being actually in a social dynamic, like locked in and talking to people. I'm good at that. Like, I don't have a problem talking to people. I can chit chat people and listen, pretty good listener, and pretty good at relating to people. And I like doing that. I like people. I like talking to them, finding out what they're into and blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's the point of this podcast, is like talking to, YouTubers for the most part and finding out what they're all about. I do like that. I'm fascinated with that. I guess the other element of it is just putting myself in those situations and not avoiding it altogether. And I fall into that all the time, of just avoiding social situations. So for instance, when we went to Vienna for the TEDx talk, there were all kinds of social events that were set up for that I did not go to.
Oh, right.
I just skipped out on all of them because of, I guess, just social anxiety. And I didn't want to tire myself. Like, I get really exhausted in those situations.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to tire myself out going to some like cheese tour or whatever, like with the other participants. Like, I never do any of that stuff. I didn't do any of that stuff when we went to Tokyo for the World Congress. It's like, sign up for this and we're going to go to this place. And it's
right.
No, I'm not going to do that. And I guess it's just a combination of feeling like it's an extra burden that I have to do, that I have to think about. Oh, now I have to figure out how to get to this place on time. And I'm going to have to talk and meet with people. And like, I get wrapped up in my head about how overwhelming that situation is. And I don't know if this sounds like crazy, but this is what I go through when it comes to stuff like that, like mentally.
It's a real force. It's a real force, and it has kind of a ripple effect. For example, with an event like that, that's a great example, because you know that when you skip out on a thing, that's time you're not meeting new people, you're not doing whatever. So there's an actual consequence to it. It's not just I feel exhausted by it or it gives me anxiety. No, there's a real thing that happens because of that decision. So yeah, it's totally a real force. What is, or are there any, not fixes to it, but what can you do to mitigate that? Or what do you do?
I don't know.
Can you get the same result in a different way? Can you, what have you done?
Not much. I mean, I guess if something is scheduled for me, I always go to it. Like, I don't skip out on things. I don't avoid things or skip out things, and I'm not late to things that I'm expected to be at, right?
You do honor all obligations, and you're always there like 15 minutes before you need to be. Every single time. I've seen this for like 10 years now.
Yes.
Where people are like fawning all over you when you show up because you're the only one who's made their job easy.
That is accurate. Yeah, I'm always on time, and
always.
Nobody else
You're ready to roll.
is. Yeah, I'm always there. I'm always on time when I'm expected to be. I don't flake on people. I don't ghost people. I don't do that. So that helps, and that's like a notch in the pros category. Yeah. The cons category is that other stuff, which is like the extracurricular social element. That's what I'm really bad at, and it is an opportunity cost. It is a very real thing to lose out on, because I personally feel like those are probably the more important things to do almost when it comes to networking, is to be like the fun person to hang out with. And I feel like I'm not the fun person to hang out with. That's all.
Well, I will say again that people really do enjoy you in all those situations. I would be honest and tell you if like, hey man, you made that one awkward, or like that went really badly, didn't it? I truly have never seen that, including a couple times when there was every reason for it to be awkward because the other person was weird. I've seen a few of those. And even in that situation, it goes well and they leave, feeling pretty good about the interaction. So it's not as grim as it probably feels, but you're right about the opportunity cost there, that you just miss out on some things and you gain some others. You can make up for it here and there. That's a good one though. Yeah.
What's your number 2?
It's my turn for number 2. I feel like a piece of number 2 for this. I do not always realize that the things that I'm into are not something that somebody else is interested in. This is a major struggle for me, and it's a broad thing that almost gets to empathy, but not quite. So a specific example of this is what comes up constantly when we work on a Vsauce 2 video, where I go back to that one example from The Legend of Zorba about the old computer, where I had like 600 amazing words describing what happened with Infocom making the video game Zork, text-based adventure game Zork. The story of Infocom is fascinating and strange and weird, starting with them sitting at a table and deciding that they wanted to have a computer company. They decided on the name Infocom and then thought, like, what are we actually going to do? They named their company before they knew what the company was even going to do. They wanted a name that sounded like an impressive, like, tech thing in the late 70s. It's really cool. Well, guess how many people are interested in what I just told you? 7, like 14 worldwide. Not many people at all. And it's such a bizarre niche. And I do that with a lot of things. It might be nut farming. I would love to have a conversation right now about the Genovese basil that Maura and I just set to dehydrate. We've been growing this basil for months, and now it's time. It was the harvest before this recording, and it's going to be delectable. The Thai basil will be the next harvest. The flowers are set aside because they can be dried and put into tea bags to brew Thai basil tea. I do not always realize that nobody wants to have a conversation about Thai basil for an hour. There's a social element to that, but in conversations, there are all these visual cues that tell you somebody doesn't care. I can see somebody get bored. I can see somebody check their phone. It's really easy. When it comes to work, though, it's extremely hard because you have no feedback of any kind on how what you're doing is going to be received. This has been perverted in an interesting way by you. You've led me down the path of perversion.
What?
by working with somebody who's very different and who gives you that feedback, you can rely on them to figure it out for you. You can rely on the differences with somebody else to identify the things that are boring, the things that stink, all of that. It's a tremendous asset, but it also can make you lazy about thinking about the audience, thinking about the intended recipient of anything. So that's another balance that I've had to work very hard to strike, is how much can I use somebody else's feedback and expertise without letting that sense atrophy for me. So I have to pull out what's amazing to me. I love this kind of stuff. I literally posted on Twitter because everybody's talking about Animal Crossing, right? Mm-hmm. And the price of turnips or something. I don't fully understand this meme because I don't play the game, but everybody's talking turnip prices. I love root vegetables, okay? In real life, not video game turnips. I like real life turnips. So I tweeted, like, everybody's talking Animal Crossing turnips. If you want to have a good conversation about turnips and rutabagas, hit me up. Boromir, thank you, Boromir. You actually hit me up, and we had a very good root vegetable farming conversation on Discord for like half an hour. It was awesome. There are very few Boromirs in the world to have that rutabaga conversation.
Find yourself a Boromir is the gist.
It's telling that out of 5,500 Twitter followers, only one wanted to talk about root vegetables. And that's something that I have to force myself to think about is, what are other people thinking? Do they care? Can somebody else help me with that? And then when they do, can I still try to do it myself without fully relying on them to tell me what's interesting and what's not? So yeah, I've gone down a lot of wasted paths and a lot of rabbit holes that nobody cares about. I've wasted untold amounts of my time and my money on just throwing it into the void over the years. Just awful.
Throwing it into your brain void. I mean, that's why when we are working on a topic, you will just flat out say, what do you find interesting here? Like, you will just present me with a thing that you've been obsessing over for 2 weeks.
Yep.
And without any prompt, or you don't give me guidance on what it is you like about it. You'll just say, look at this. What stands out to you? What pops for you?
I lead with that now. I don't know if you've noticed that now every time we talk about a topic and we decide, yeah, this is something that you should make a video about, the first thing I do is be like, here's the crash course on the topic. What stands out to you that's interesting? And then I use that basic framework as a guide and research, offshoots of it. But if I asked myself what was interesting, I would have a wildly successful YouTube channel for Boromir and like 4 other people in the world. That's it.
Yeah.
5 people would care about my Infocom documentary.
I know. I just wish there was a term for what it is that you have, like whatever your mental problem is that makes you so obsessive of things like root vegetables. Like, what is that? But it's not just root vegetables. It's not like, okay, like for instance, I had a cousin, or I have a cousin who, when he was very, very, very little, was obsessed with garbage trucks and garbage. I don't know why. Yeah. It was just a phase that he went through. I also knew a kid when I was younger who was obsessed with dinosaurs and would just act like a dinosaur. And that was like a little phase that he went through. And that was like one thing that these people like honed in on. But you hone in on everything. Like, I can't think of almost anything that you will not hone. What do you not hone in on?
I don't know. Yeah, there's not much that I pass by. If there's a topic, it's probably worth taking pretty deep. Like, so for example, I drink a lot of water and juice and stuff during the day, probably 1.5 gallons a day. And I reuse Gatorade bottles, Powerade bottles. I'll refill them with, drink mixes and stuff like that. Well, they're plastic, so they're recyclable. And the little recycling symbol on the bottom of a bottle?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a number inside it. There's
Yeah.
notation around that symbol. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, I used to know what that indicated. I forgot. So then I spent like an hour reading about notation on recycling so that I would never pick up a bottle or can again and not know what the number 4 meant.
Which is what? It's the type of plastic, right? And like where you can recycle it or something?
Yeah, it indicates a bunch. And it's neat with some things that are historical, that kind of thing can tell you when something was made and where it was made and all sorts of information. Gibson guitars, by the way, they have a neat system in their serial numbers that tells you a shocking amount of information about the production of that instrument. The date and the number of instrument that day that it was. I find that really cool. But I'll pull at a thread like that probably longer and harder than is healthy.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. All right. Yeah.
This is your last suckage.
I will hit you with my last suckage. My number 3 is self-promotion. So.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I'm not really great at self-promotion. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm not like huge into my ego or like stroking myself. Like, I will tweet when I have a new thing out, or I'll tweet like a joke. I'm more into self-deprecation than self-promotion. And I don't think that is necessarily always a good mix, especially with the type of content that I do on Vsauce 2 as compared to the type of content that I do, like, for instance, on my personal Twitter or even really on my Instagram. I prefer to kind of make fun of myself and the world and words, and like I like to play with that stuff in a way that is, I don't know, I think comes across often as cynical, I guess. Cynical, sarcastic, kind of jaded. But that's just my sensibility and what I like and how I kind of entertain myself a lot of the time. But Vsauce 2 is kind of the opposite of that, right? Like it really is about amazement and celebration and like the exploration of positivity and ideas and wonderment. And then meanwhile, like when I'm not working on that, I like to almost do the polar opposite of that. And I think that there's a conflict there with fans that makes it seem, I don't know, weird. It's weird, I guess, for to be fans of both, maybe. I don't know.
It's an interesting kind of conundrum because you want to have confidence in something, but you don't want to spam anybody, whether it's actually spamming them on a social media site or just overloading them with that thing. And I think it's pretty healthy to think how much is too much. But I talk to a lot of YouTubers who are of a similar mindset as you on it, where it's like, I want to do my thing and I want to put it out there and that's cool, but I don't want to force feed it. I really don't want to market my thing in a way that looks like I'm marketing my thing. And that's really nice in some ways. In others, it means you're not marketing your thing.
Yeah.
That's just the raw reality of it. And we've talked about it in terms of specific sites. I know a long time ago, Gary Vee did a thing on his podcast where he talked about the amount of content a company should be putting out on its social media each day. And he's like, oh, everybody should have 5 Instagram posts and 5 Facebook posts. It amounted to like 35 messages on different platforms a day. And it sounds insane. You look at that and just think, who wants to hear from Kevin Lieber 35 times in one day?
Right.
I don't, and I literally get paid to do it.
Right.
But the reality is that a person is probably only seeing 1 or 2 of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Just the viewing patterns and the way different sites serve the content. Nobody's actually seeing 35. And if they do, it's because they really want to. They like you that much. They're fans that are strong enough to just need and want that content. So it's this odd balance. You don't want to be spammy, but there are some people who want to be spammed, and that's a really healthy thing.
And you're right though about the way that some of these algorithms work now, where I posted a video on Facebook on Friday, and somebody popped into the comments saying they hadn't thought I made a video in 2 years. Not a single video in 2 years. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Can confirm you've done nothing since 2017. It's all a lie.
I've done nothing. So I literally linked him just to the Vsauce 2 videos page where you can see all of the videos right there. And he replied right away and was just kind of like, oh my gosh, where have I been? And the answer is, well, you've been on the internet assuredly this entire time, but whatever it is you've been looking at, Vsauce 2 hasn't been served to you in apparently 2 years, which is crazy.
Even for subscribers, every single video you've put out since I've been doing anything with you gets a handful of comments that say something like, great to see this guy uploading again. They haven't seen you. They're subs, and just what you've done has not popped on their feeds at all. They really legitimately think it's your first video in a year or 2 or 3. Now, there have been comments recently where it was clear that the last time somebody saw your thing, Obama was president. It's nuts.
Right.
But that's the reality of the way some of the social media works. And that's important to remember when you're thinking about over marketing yourself. Like, no, legitimately, you got to do a lot and you got to push yourself, because the chances that everybody's seeing it are pretty much nil. That's really a huge point of self-awareness that I think everybody in a creative capacity needs. You recognize it and you do things to get out in front of it. Like, that's fantastic. Virtually nobody I know does that.
Well, I hope that more people do, because the way that all this stuff works now, you kind of have to be everywhere all the time. And if you're not, people who really want to see your stuff just don't think you exist anymore. So yeah, I mean, I'm not great at self-promotion. I wish I were better, and hopefully I can be better. The Facebook page is going to start popping. That's definitely something this year that is happening. The return of the Vsauce 2 Facebook page. For those of you boomers still on Facebook, you will see me again.
Tell your grandparents that Vsauce Facebook is about to pop.
Yes.
So my last one is really short, which is good. Then we can go into baby gang questions. It's short because you've already revealed it. My third one is obsession.
Oh.
That is, yeah. We started to get there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I take a topic of some kind and I deal with that thing in my off time, and I mean to a freakish degree sometimes, and an example to go back to nut farming. I realized that since we've all had to stay inside and all that, and I started to think about hazelnuts in particular, because I'd like to be the Baron of Filbert. That's my dream.
Wait, what?
Filberts and hazelnuts, same thing.
Oh, okay.
But I want a title that has to be of Filbert.
Okay.
So, I'll think about what would sound the best. And we talked about it here, and I think Mo wanted to be the Duchess of Filbert. That sounds like a real thing.
Yeah, the only Filbert I know is the turtle from Rocko's Modern Life. So I'm like, you're the Baron of like a nervous cartoon turtle? Okay.
Well, during the day, I'm thinking about something that's either business or math. Then there's the time that goes into the podcast, and talking to everybody, which, by the way, I really value the Discord and Twitter and stuff like that, because I have to talk about whatever everybody else is. It snaps me out of whatever I'm thinking constantly about. But then I'm real tired, and for about 6 weeks, I've gone to bed, and I lay there and think about nut farming until I fall asleep. Every night, it's nut farming. The amount of time that goes into that, it's an opportunity cost issue. You know how many languages I could speak at this point if I didn't do this? Like, I only speak English. I can kind of read Latin. I can do like a tiny little bit of Hebrew. I'm useless on languages, but I would be like a walking Tower of Babel if I did not waste my life thinking about things like nut farming every night. In terms of work stuff, when we've talked about how a topic goes down a whole bunch of rabbit holes, and that's what makes it interesting. So when you have a tendency to obsess over things, you can stay down the rabbit hole way too long. Mm-hmm. You can go way too deep on something that ultimately doesn't matter or isn't that interesting, or you could write 1,000 words about something that really should be 25. Mm-hmm. It's so difficult to it's almost like a hyperactive thing that you're constantly holding back. Mm-hmm. But it has to happen, or else you would just bounce around like a pinball all day long and never get anything useful done. So it's another double-edged sword on obsession that makes some things really good. And I enjoy a lot of very normal things that other people don't, precisely because there's an in-depth knowledge of them. Mm-hmm. When we talked about merch stuff, when we talked about, like the construction of T-shirts, this was like a year ago, about going through all the different garment types and dye types and the price implications and whatever. Like, that is a natural fit for my DNA, that type of topic, because it healthily and purposefully lets me go crazy about something. Mm-hmm. Those types of fits don't happen very often. Most of the time, it's just me going crazy about something.
About legumes.
Yeah. And I'll it's weird because I will go off on some topic into strange detail, and, Mo will sit there and look at me like I'm an idiot at a certain point because it has gone on too long. It's kind of a culmination of some of the other problems that I mentioned, where I'm not thinking back to number 2 of what's the other person interested in and what they're not. In a way, obsession leads to the grand visions that are too big. All of this stuff kind of feeds in one another. Your problems. What was the first one again? The technical side.
Yeah, they totally feed into one another. My 30,000 foot problem is just being in my head too much and not being in reality too much. I'm 90% in my head, in my own head, 10% on this planet. And there are so many ways in which that's a good thing, and there are so many ways in which that's a bad thing. Yeah.
Your number 2 and 3 sound like very different things. Networking and social stuff versus, how did you word the third one? Oh, marketing stuff, basically.
Self-promotion, yeah.
Well, that's what number 2 is, in a large way. Whether you're talking to tell people something or you're listening, it's all, it all comes together. But all of these things are kind of related. And I think it's like that for most people, where there's this common thread that runs through the challenges that they have. And you don't necessarily know what that is. For me, it's a hyperactive obsession that goes in all 3 of the directions I outlined. Well, I didn't fully realize that until we really started to work together. You said at the beginning, it's you got to do stuff and work with people so you can start to figure these things out. I would truly encourage everybody, whether they're creative or not, because all of this stuff applies to personal relationships and everything. It's all the same. To do a little inventory of what are a couple things I suck at, and do I see a pattern here?
Yeah, and the thing is that those things are so subconscious that the only way to do anything about them has to be conscious. You have to be conscious of the things you're subconsciously doing, in order to do anything about it. Because if you're not conscious of it, you're just going to keep doing it forever and ever. It'll never get better. You'll make the same mistakes. And that's just kind of how this stuff works. So anyway, I hope that people got a nice little insight. It was kind of cathartic to talk about the things we suck at rather than just focusing on like, oh, like here are some great tips for everyone. It's like, well, here's a great tip. Be conscious of the things that you suck at. And if you aren't, then maybe you need to spend more time interacting with other people to give yourself some sort of reference and some sort of feedback mechanism so you can kind of recalibrate your weaknesses and hopefully minimize their impact so that you can maximize your strengths.
If you're on YouTube hearing this, leave a comment about like at least the number one thing that you suck at. Because I'm interested in what other people have a hard time with. If you're on Twitter, shoot us a tweet about what you suck at. Say it in the Discord. Whatever method you've got to tell us about your fatal flaws. It just would be really interesting. And it was great with people talking about what they were doing during the quarantine. Brickzar had a really good comment on that episode, and it's been really interesting to get that kind of feedback and see the different ways that people handle something or different diagnoses they have for themselves on something like this. It's awesome. So definitely shoot that through.
Yeah, and let's get to some of your Baby Gang Infantry Patreon questions.
So the first question comes from James, who wants to know, Kevin, would you rather for the rest of time be followed around by a trail of 3 noisy ducks or a small rain cloud that rains on you? You cannot ditch the ducks. They are indestructible. The rain cloud also follows you everywhere and rains on you, which I have to assume means while you're going to the bathroom as well.
Indoors?
I have to assume that based on what James outlined here. I think this is happening everywhere.
All right. Because if it was just outdoors, I would say the rain easily, because rain doesn't really bother me all that much. But if it's indoors, gosh, being constantly, I'm trying to think if I could fashion some sort of like umbrella. Remember those umbrella hats you would see? Yeah. Just wear an umbrella hat everywhere. Maybe I'd be able to adapt some sort of cool like suit where it wasn't bothering me, but the ducks would bother everyone all the time.
That's what I was thinking too.
Because they would hear the ducks. So I'm going to go with the rain cloud.
The rain cloud would absolutely be only your problem. For the most part, it would be your problem.
Yeah, unless you were getting
ducks.
Close with somebody, then they would also get rained upon.
Getting close, Kevleeb.
Getting close. Yeah, like hugging your mom.
Hugging your mom? Is that what getting close is?
Yes. Yeah.
Getting close.
Getting close.
When you're courting the woman folk.
Courting whomever folk. Just getting close. I think that's enough. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be like a lewd act. It could just be polite.
Subscribe to Kevin's OnlyFans for more getting close content.
Good Lord. 3
noisy ducks would be everybody else's problem all the time, though. I think you've nailed the distinction on that.
Yeah.
Monsieur Chinchilla has a question that is kind of operational Vsauce.
Oh.
It's about, has Ding become Diet Vsauce 1? I know it's not your channel, but that's an interesting transition that a lot of people have asked about.
Yeah, I think Diet Vsauce 1 is a really interesting way to put it. I think of it as Michael's vlog, quite honestly. Yeah. I think of Ding as Michael's vlog. You know, when Ding first started and it was Dong, we were using it as a way to transition shows like Dong that people still really loved, but maybe didn't fit as well on the main channels. And this is something that we've done a bunch over the years, but Ding evolved from Dong to Ding into an outlet for Michael to do kind of quicker stuff. The videos that he does on Vsauce 1 take literal months and months of research and formulating for him, Whereas the stuff on Ding, it can be just something that he's been thinking about for like a week, and then he can make a video on. So, yeah, diet Vsauce1. I like that.
I think of it more like Chili's. You know how they have Chili's to go? Like the installations that are kind of the same food, but yeah. Because it's like the content is just as interesting and just as deep and all that. It's just that vlog, like less formal, more relaxed, quickie kind of format.
Yeah. I think there's a clear distinction between what he does on Vsauce1 with like, you know, how many holes are in the human body as opposed to something like, you know, how to build a siphon or something. So, yeah, it's a good distinction.
That's good. Now, Spencer asks, if time travel became real and you could go anywhere theoretically, when and where would you go?
Well,
this is
can
hard.
I go
this
to the future or do I have to go to the past?
It just says time travel, so I have to assume that you can go forward or back.
I'm going forward, man. I'm not going back. I do not want to go back. I cannot think.
No, not at all?
No. The human history is garbage. What a terrible... Where would you go? That would be awesome. Other than for like one day to be like, wow, this was terrible.
I think we have to assume that you could be there as long or as short as you wanted. So I think that's on the table that, you know, like I'd want to go back and see, you know, Elvis perform, that kind of thing. And then you get back in your time travel pod and return to your life.
Okay.
If that's in play, is there, you know, so you're not stuck there is my point.
Okay.
You know, stuck there going to the hospital and they pull out, you know, a saw and like a rag to sniff.
No. Yeah. The jar of leeches to balance your 4 humors because you have a cough. Okay. Yeah. If it was just like specific, but still, I mean, that's not going too far back. It's like, wow, I would go to 1969 and watch Jimi Hendrix play guitar. Like, yeah, that would be cool. But what would you do?
You could only do it once, though. Let's say it's a single-use disposable time machine. I'm adding that condition. Is there one thing that stands out?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I probably would want to see Nirvana play. I can't really think of anything else. I never got to see them live. They're my favorite band.
In all of human history, you want to see Nirvana play?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything else. Like what? Watch the freaking Hindenburg blow up? Like what would you do?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, this is really hard because there's so much to choose from. Like shocking amounts of stuff to choose from. But whatever it would be something that's poorly documented. That right now we understand through guesswork and analysis that probably is wrong. It would have to be something like that where I would finally know something because I saw it with my own eyes. It definitely would be that. So when I think of something like, oh, you know, do you want to go to Woodstock? Well, look, there's a lot of footage of Woodstock. Like it was an extremely well documented thing. Mm-hmm. So I would pass personally on that. Whereas, I don't know, hanging around with Jesus would be very cool. I'd have a primary source for exactly what that was about, rather than testimony that is in dispute. I didn't even
think about that. Go back in time and hang out with Jesus. I guess that's pretty good.
Yeah. But it's something that I otherwise would not know for absolute certain. Yeah. But then having done it, I would have a perspective that I could not get elsewhere. So like, I don't know exactly what it would be, but it would be along those lines.
Yeah. Take a walk with Buddha.
That was a good question. Exactly. Yeah. A lot of good opportunities there.
I don't know. I'm going to the future. Forget the past.
Well,
I want to see what video games are
on its
like.
own.
That's where I'm at.
You're basically Eric Cartman waiting for that console in the episode where he like freezes himself.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I think that's what I'm into. Hey, I like what I like. It's okay.
There you go.
Yeah, is that it? Are we done? No more questions?
Oh, let me actually pull one that didn't make it to Chad. because only you can answer this one. I definitely can't. Do you wipe sitting down or standing up?
Oh my God. There are people who wipe standing up?
Did you see the meme where it's like, do you do this or this? And one is a person sitting down, but the stand-up person is like bent over at a 45-degree angle, fully standing, like their legs are totally vertical. So which one is it? What's your strategy?
Definitely not. I'm not a meme. I definitely don't go out of my way to make things as difficult as possible for myself. No, I don't do that. It's crazy.
Well, thank you for the question, Isaac. Now we know.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have to ask Chad next time he comes on, because I'm sure he'll have a better answer than I do.
Now we know he's going to do the most proper, like cleanliness-based thing. Now that we know that he's like Miss Manners. There's just no question that he has like a solid reason behind every bit of that routine.
Yeah, he has some sort of 24 karat gold bidet that he uses that like pumps Avion water.
That's changed like 3 times a day.
Yeah. Disinfected.
He's shamed me into sheet washing, by the way. I think that's going to be... I felt ashamed after we talked to Chad, and I thought, my God, I've been like a little lizard molting and living in
your own
skin.
filth. Yeah, the guy who drinks McDonald's cups from the gutter has cleaner sheets than you. It's a bit of an awakening, I think.
That's a wake-up call, yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will catch you next time. See you, Space Cowboys.
We'd like to thank everybody who we talk to every day in the Discord, and especially the patrons who make this show happen. Thanks to our editor, Marcus Allen, and to associate producers Jeff Davis, Isaac Teal, Trev's Dead, James Gallagher, Baseweight, Andrew Stimson, Keaton Sample, Jesse Robertson, Boromir, Monsieur Chinchilla, Sean Malone, Jen Mafasanti, Kevin with an E. Menard, Monahim Yogurt96, Fraken, and our newest addition, Mikhail. Thank you for signing up, Mikhail. We love it. Also, thanks to baby wrangling super producer Ben Webster. Thanks as well to Paula Lieber and the stunningly gorgeous Mo Lewitt, and to our very generous sponsor of every episode, Eagle Brand Sardines. The Create Unknown is a production of Unknown Media. Okay, bye.